This Shabbos is Shabbos Chanukah. It is an extraordinary Shabbos. We're going to learn from 3 Sifrei Torah, one in honor of Shabbos, one for Chanukah, and one for Rosh Chodesh. I'd like to focus on the Al Hanisim, which we say throughout Chanukah, and specifically the part of the Al Hanisim in which we reflect on the milchamos, on the wars that Hashem has brought upon us and for which we are thankful. What you say? Well, let's listen to the words. Al hanisim v'al ha'porkan v'al ha'gvuros v'al ha'tshuos v'al ha'milchamos she'asisa lavosenu. We thank you, Hashem, for the miracles and the salvation and the victories and the wars that you did for the Jewish people, for our lavosenu, for our ancestors. In those days and in ours. Why are we thanking Hashem for a milchamas? Why are we thanking Hashem for the wars? There are 2 basic buckets of answers to this question. One bucket looks at variant texts that resolve or minimize the problem of thanking Hashem for milchamos. And the other bucket of answers deals with the content, assuming that we're thanking Hashem for the wars. What are we doing? So let's take a look at the first bucket first. It's brought down in the name of the Siddur Yavitz, who quotes the Baal HaMor and says that there's a variant text. The way it reads is, we thank you, Hashem, al hachuos, for the victories, al hamilchamos, for the wars, the victories of the wars, the victories for the wars, not al hachuos ve'al hamilchamos, for the victories and for the wars. No, for the victories over the wars. And so if you just remove that little vav before milchamos, then you resolve the problem. A second approach here is brought down by the Abu Dram. And Abu Dram says that there's a different nusach. Indeed, many Sfaradim have the nusach today of the Abu Dram, which is al hanisim v'al ha'porkan v'al ha'gvuros v'al ha'tshuos ve'al ha'nechamos. We thank you, Hashem, not for the wars, but for the nechama, for the consolation, for the consolation of coming through challenging times, tragic times, and coming through and being consoled after the tragedy. We thank you, Hashem, or the potential tragedy. We thank you, Hashem, for all of it. And that is what the Abu Dram says. Indeed, based on the Gemara, based on the Gemara in Tainus, that you don't thank Hashem for the sword that is hanging over us, even afilu cherev shel shalom. We don't give thanks for war, even if the sword that is being waged is a sword of war that is going to help and protect and defend the Jewish people. We might thank Hashem for the victory. We might thank Hashem for the consequence, but not for the war itself. And this seems to be somewhat self-evident, and it expresses an ethos that even in as much as war might sometimes be necessary, and we are thankful that we have the courage and the ability to be able to defend ourselves and to be victorious, the loss of life and the notion of war itself is inherently problematic and inherently disdainful. And even though it's necessary, and we thank Hashem for the consequent victory, we can't thank Hashem for the slaughter and the death that occurs that occurs in war itself. Okay, one other approach, and this is based on a nusach of the Rambam. It doesn't entirely resolve it, but it does at least minimize the problem, and that is that the nusach flips. Not al hachuos ve'al hamilchamos for the victories and the wars, but al hamilchamos for the wars, and then al hachuos she'asisa lavosenu. In other words, we could say, thank you, Hashem, al hanisim v'al ha'porkan v'al ha'gvuros v'al ha'milchamos. Thank you, Hashem, for the miracles and all that stuff leading up to the war, and then v'al ha'tshuos she'asisa lavosenu, and on the victories that you did for us. So at least it's not the wars that you did for us, it's the victories that you did for us. And so even if this last approach doesn't entirely resolve the question, it does at least minimize it. And this is one bucket of answers. We're not actually thanking Hashem for the war that He brought upon us. But there is another set of answers, and that is that we are thanking Hashem for the war. We are thanking Hashem for the milchamos. On one level, we're thanking Hashem al hamilchamos she'asisa l'avoseinu, for the milchamas that you did for our ancestors. Bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. And we recognize that you, Hashem, it is your divine involvement, your divine engagement that caused the victory of the war. And the war itself is guided entirely by your hashgacha pratis. We are simply the agents. Yes, we have the choice, and we have the bechira chafshus, and we must take up arms as necessary. But we are simply the vehicles through which you, Hashem, are expressing your will. Ala milchamos she'asisa, you did the war. You made it. We were simply the agents of your divine will. And so it was at the time of the Maccabim, and in subsequent times as well. So that's another way of looking at it. We are thanking Hashem not for war, but thanking Hashem for his divine involvement, for his hashgacha pratis, for his divine intervention at every level of life. And then finally, one idea which has been cited in the name of many rabbis and commentators, and that is, we thank Hashem for the milchamos. We thank Hashem for there's not thanking Hashem for the war. We're thanking Hashem for the koach, for the courage, for the internal fortitude, for the strength of character, for us to be able to get up and do what was necessary during the time of the Chashmonaim, but even more so, by Yamim Haim, Bazman Hazeh, throughout history. How much death and destruction and carnage has the Jewish people been inflicted upon simply for the audacity of standing up for our beliefs, for our Masorah, for our tradition, for simply wanting to do Dvar Hashem. And you know what? Maybe after one war, or 1 century, or 2 centuries, at some point, you just get worn down. 3 centuries, 1 millennia, 2,000 years. At some point, it's just natural to get beaten and broken by the challenge, by the difficulty, by the burden of it all. Al Hanisim, we thank you, Hashem, for the miracles, etc., ve'al hamilchamos, and for giving us the koach, the strength to keep the battle going, not to give up, not to give in, throughout our history, not to be broken by the burden, but in fact to rise above it, and to continue on with great vitality and life. Even today, when we live in a time of relative peace and tranquility, there are still challenges that we as Jewish people face. They are more nuanced, hopefully, and less physically threatening, but they're still out there. And our ability to stand strong in the face of a society that challenges our way of life in many ways requires a strength of character and psychological strength and fortitude to keep going, to keep it on, to keep moving forward, and to stand strong in our values and our beliefs and our fidelity and loyalty to Ritzon Hashem. Yes, we thank you, Hashem, for giving us the koach to keep it going, that the light of Torah, the flame of Torah, continues to burn bright because of our actions, because of our choices, because of our never-ending commitment to Ritzon Hashem. And we thank you, Hashem, for giving us the opportunity and the ability to wage that battle, and not to be broken and bent by the weight of that burden as well. I want to share with you a story recorded by Yafa Elyach, which I think reflects this notion of thanking Hashem for giving us the continued strength to carry on the battle. And it's a story about Chanukah that she shares about the Bluzhever Rabbi in Bergen, Belsen. And it was Chanukah night at Bergen, Belsen, the first night of Chanukah, and the Bluzhever Rabbi gathered a throng of Jews inside a barrack. And with a makeshift menorah out of a potato and a little thread for a wick and some oil that they were able to somehow collect together, he lit the candle on the first night of Chanukah. And he lit the first candle and he said the bracha, lahadlik ner shel Chanukah. And he lit the second candle and he said sha'asa nisim. And then he was about to light the third candle, to say the third bracha, and he paused. And then he proceeded, Shechiyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu lazman hazeh. Thank you, Hashem, for letting me live and bringing me to this very day. Well, after he was done, there was a Jew in the barracks who was significantly challenged by the tragedy and darkness of the time, in terms of his faith and trust and emunah in Hashem. And he went over to the rabbi, to the Bluzhever Rebbe, and he said to him, somewhat disdainfully, with some great chutzpah, he called him by his last name. His name was Rabbi Spira. And he said, Spira, I understand why you might have wanted to make the first bracha. I can even understand why you may have said the second bracha. But how could you possibly make the third bracha? Shechiyanu v'kiyamanu v'giyanu lazman hazeh. Thank you for letting me live to see this day. What day? How could you say such a bracha? And the Bluzhever Rebbe responded, you're right. I thought maybe you were right. And maybe I shouldn't say the bracha. And I hesitated. And I decided to turn around to consult with some of the other very august rabbanim who were there at the time, who were there with me. And as I turned around, said the Bluzhever Rebbe, I saw the throngs of Jews standing in a large crowd, expressing faith and devotion and concentration as they were listening to the rit of kindling the Chanukah lights. And I said to myself, Ribbona Shalom, if God has such a nation that at times like these, when during the lighting of the Chanukah candles they see in front of them bodies of their beloved fathers and brothers and sons and sisters, and death is staring them at every corner, and despite all that, they stand with devotion listening to the Chanukah brachas, then it seems to me, if I was blessed to see such a people with so much emunah, so much bitachon, so much faith and fervor, then I am under special obligation to recite the third bracha, Shechiyanu v'kiyamanu v'higyanu lazman hazeh. This, I believe, is thanking Hashem for the milchamos, for giving us the strength to go on and never be broken and never bend, but to vitally and beautifully and with great verve and vigor hold on to Ritzon Hashem as the defining factor in our lives. Good Shabbos.